As I mentioned in the last video, I'm currently filming some videos about comparing 3 amps together. I'm looking for my sort of perfect combo or 6v6 lower wattage amp compared to the 100 watt 2-rock classic reverb that I use most of the time. So I'm filming that at the moment, but it just occurred to me because I was looking through some comments that a few people had referred to my first video about the Vintage Deluxe and had said that they thought it was muffled or dark. And I actually was chatting to a guy on Instagram who had bought a Vintage Deluxe and thought it was too dark and changed it for a classic reverb pretty quickly. And I basically wanted to make this video to show you that I don't think it's too dark or too muffled. So here's just a little bit of footage from that first video. Okay, what you're hearing in that video is my Dale Wilson Masterbuilt Strat. And there is a thing with that where I tune it down to D almost all the time because I think it sounds incredible. And then it's got Abigail Ibarra, original Abigail Ibarra pickups in there. And put those two things together, and I think honestly you get this massive, crazy voodoo child sound that I personally love, and I know a lot of people do like that sort of sound, tuning their guitar down to D for Hendrix style stuff. Admittedly, if you come to a demo of an amp and I didn't make you aware, and I can't remember if I did in that video, and you're new to the channel as well, probably you don't think that someone's tuned their guitar down to D and used really fat strings as well. So, my bad on that, and in future when I use that guitar, I'll either tune it up to normal Hendrix tuning, so a semitone up, or I'll let you know. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why at least it came across as dark. So if you weren't expecting that, that's the guitar more than the amp. So I've still got it in D here though, and I've just changed the settings a bit. This is not the final settings you're going to see in this video, and I'm going to use a different Strat as well to prove my point. But just having things set a bit more brightly on the amp and a little bit cleaner as well can make it sound like this, even with this very fat sounding guitar that's fat sounding when it's tuned in standard or E flat or D. Okay, now next on that is that first day you have an amp, you're not really sure about the settings, right? That was my first impressions video, and I sort of just set the amp, not at random, but quickly, and it was one of the first settings I used. I liked it because it sounded a lot like my Bassman that I have, my 59 Bassman, played with that Strat. And it was just there to be the first impression, and I was impressed with the amp. I now have got better at using the controls. This is an amp that you can use the controls pretty wildly. You can have the treble whacked up a lot, you can have the mids whacked up a lot, you can use the bright switch, it doesn't ruin things, it's not spiky like an old Fender amp can be. The presence is good. I don't love a lot of presence, like a lot of people don't love a lot of presence because it tends to raise a certain frequency that you might not love, but it is a very, when you roll it back, you don't feel that it's in there, right? So that's good. And actually, with some guitars, I do put it up just because it helps to increase that upper mid thing. Then you've got the taking out the tone stack and using the control on the back. That can really brighten things up, and there will be at a later point in this video. That will be there. open the master up, and this is obviously not relevant if you can't play very loud, but that's just the way it is. But if you open the master up a lot and use a gain, it even says at that point the bright switch becomes less and less useful. The amp opens up and it becomes a bit brighter sounding. But I will add that, you know, everyone's ears are different, everyone's used to playing different things, everyone's definitions are different, and not everyone is into the same sort of... I'm really into... I love dark sounding stuff because, you know, I play a baritone a lot, I down tune guitars a lot, and so I think I'm happy to hear that sound and find it satisfying. On top of that, there was a lot of reverb. This amp the reverb is incredible. It's very vintagey feeling, right? Compared to the other two Rock amps, it's not as tight as those. And I probably had too much reverb in that first video, so that would have definitely washed out the sound as well. And what's interesting about this Strat is it's got different pickups in made by Foley. They're called Foley the Ones, and they're very similar, if not the same, to the pickups that John at Peach has in his main guitar that he used in his demo. Now, his demo didn't sound dark because of the way he set the amp. He's also tuned to E flat, not D. But also, and this is a key point because I've recorded in that room a couple of times, it's a very bright room and it's massive. It's a great sounding room, it's glorious, but it does have a hard and bright effect to it. It's big and it's all wood. The walls, everything, wood. He didn't need much reverb in that video, if you noticed as well, because the room creates its own sort of echo, and that echo is bright as well. So that works well for an amp and recording an amp. My room is probably more realistic to what you will have at home, and to places that aren't just covered in wood. Mine has a rug on the floor and normal walls and guitars on the walls and stuff everywhere. So that's that. You're going to see me go through different settings here, just showing you how the amp can be really bright, probably too bright, and then I find a sweet spot for myself. And I haven't played this guitar in a long time, so the strings are really old, which doesn't always help in playing. But having played it for this 10 minutes, I'm excited to restring it and play it more often. Just beware, it looks like I'm in the bridge position a lot. I'm not, I'm in the neck position. I've swapped the electrics around. Another point I wanted to make is that I use a ribbon mic, an SM57, and then a room mic. And in that first video, I definitely had the ribbon mic a lot more pronounced than the SM57. I don't always love the sound of an SM57. It's harsher and more direct and more punchy, and I personally like the sort of more dark sound of a ribbon mic. And that's just the way it was set. I've got it more balanced today, so that's another thing, is obviously when you're watching YouTubers, if someone's using real mics and not going through a box, then miking makes a massive difference. The type of microphone, more importantly than the type, is probably how they're located compared to the amp. compared to someone else, depending what part of the speaker they're on. You know, there's a lot of different factors that go into a recording, and it means that some of it is artistic license. I want it to sound a certain way. I enjoy it sounding a certain way. And although my videos are a lot of them about gear or about reviewing something, ultimately I want to spend my days enjoying myself. So I do set things up the way I like it. And I think that's all the main points covered. On top of that, I think, have pretty dark hands. Some people have bright hands, some people don't. Some people have dark hands. I tend to, I think, hit pretty hard. And it probably, just if you're not used to that, it breaks up a lot. And the last thing is, someone mentioned the traditional clean. That's a very clean and clear amp. That clarity thing, it's very modern. Obviously the famous players who use things like traditional cleans probably play quite open and clear, and a lot of pedals involved with that sort of amp, and that's all good. For me, this vintage sound is completely different, and possibly not one you're going for. If the traditional clean's your favorite amp, then this is probably the other end of the spectrum. And last thing I want to say is, do you want a video of me just talking about my experience with 2-rock amps and which ones I think suit which types of players? There wouldn't necessarily be a lot of playing in that video. I don't have myself recorded playing the Silver Sterling or the traditional clean. I may be able to find some old videos of my Bloomfield Drive, but I probably deleted them all at this point. It's quite a long time ago, and the TS1 was recent, so I could have some of that. But my opinions are there. So if you think that's something you'd like, let me know down in the comments, because I can make that. It wouldn't be a very long video, maybe 15 minutes long, but I could just categorize each amp to how I see them. So that could help you decide. I've had that question probably a few times a month for the last year and a half since I put out loads of videos about 2-rocks. Anyway, I hope this has been somewhat illuminating. I don't think this is a particularly dark amp. I think you can set it in so many different ways. And yes, its drive is vintage style, it's grindy, it's gritty, and this is definitely not an amp for someone looking for that platform or that sort of more clear, crystal clear thing, because it may not do that. The L6 version of that might do more like that. And that's another thing. Thank you very much to a viewer who reached out to me earlier this week and is bringing his 6L6 Vintage Deluxe next week, so I can compare them. So you can look forward to that video next week. That's something I'm really keen to do. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.